Welcome, Seeker, to Mystic Praxis, a charming podcast at the crossroads where the eclectic meets the divine. Join us as we play with integrating spiritual pathmaking and modern culture to make our everyday lives more mindful, mystical, and magical, and to share what we learn along the way. Whether you're a longtime skeptic or down for some full-on witchy woo-woo, this lo-fi, high-vibe series has got you covered.
Hi, welcome to Mystic Praxis. I'm Allie, and I am so excited that you have joined me to kick this off in what is our introductory, very first 00th episode, where we are going to discuss, it's sort of a meta episode, yeah? We're going to be discussing a little bit about what the show is about, what inspired the show, what we're going to be trying to accomplish, a little bit about me, maybe a little bit about you. Let's see how far we get. And the reason why I am so excited is twofold. One is because we're going to be talking about a very important topic on this show, which is play, which is exploration, which is experimentation, which is magic, which is spirituality, which is witchy stuff maybe, who knows. And I think that is such it's a relevant topic, even if it is something that you have not recently considered. It is something for us to think about. So what the show is about.
And that's one reason why I'm so excited to be chatting with you about this. The other is because it has been kind of a long time coming, bringing some of these ideas together, trying to figure out in what form I want to, and that I am interested in sharing these ideas with the world.
The show is about play. It's about sovereignty. It is about exploring ideas. It is about experimenting with concepts in the arena of personal alchemy, of new age, of spirituality, of self-help. To me, a lot of these concepts are kind of interwoven. And what I really want to talk about are practices that we could engage in that can help us make our lives better, feel better, live our lives better. And so these sort of fall under the umbrella of what I would call orthodoxy versus orthopraxy. So I read a very interesting book by Thorne Mooney. It was on traditional Wicca, and I think the chapter where she covered orthodoxy versus orthopraxy was worth the price of the book alone, because that created kind of a mental shift for me. I had always been thinking of, when I think about spirituality, I think of framework of belief. I think of belief systems. I think of religions. And I hadn't really considered the practices, the orthopraxy, as something separate from the belief systems, the orthodoxy. So that is essentially what we're going to be talking about on this show, are some of the practices that one might engage in to feel better, to connect with the divine, to gain mindfulness, to manifest our intentions, all of those fun things. So what are those practices? And I think one of the reasons why this idea of orthodoxy versus orthopraxy resonated with me so much is because it's sort of tied up in my mind with the concept of spiritual sovereignty, which is this idea that we while there's a few things in there, one is that our experience of spirituality maybe doesn't need to be mediated by any third party, by any official person, but I think, or official framework or official process. It can be something we discover to ourselves because it can be unique to ourselves. And so what kind of spiritual practices, what kind of experimentation or processes that have existed before are things that we can use on our own to tap into that sort of divine interconnection, if that's something that you believe in. Personally, I believe everything is interconnected, not just from a sense of spirituality, but if you sort of look at the world, if you think of the ecology of the world, we know that life is interconnected and interdependent. We know that culture is interconnected and we're interdependent. If you work in technology or you use technology, you know everything is networked, everything is interconnected, and we have things tied up together in software and social systems, which is an area of interest for me, because in addition to being kind of woo-woo, it turns out that I am a tech nerd. And so thinking about how things are interconnected is both a sort of philosophical exercise, but also something I live practically day to day. Which brings us to that whole woo-woo bit, which is this show is going to be about magic. It's going to be about mysticism and spirituality and manifesting and psychospiritual analysis, all the things. And I am interested in what we will learn when we sort of tap into these ideas. Because the sort of last thing that this show I think is going to be about really is about culture. It's about community. It's about art. It's about habit hacking, mindfulness. It's about all of these practices and ideas that connect us to each other and connect us to ourselves in the modern world. So when I know this is going to sound a little strange, but when I think about spirituality, I actually think of sort of a pastoral living. Like I think of folks who sort of, maybe they're connected to the land or they're connected to the circles of the earth or weather, life in the sort of pastoral, idealized ways. But you know what? I live in a city. I'm currently recording this from a parking lot because I am literally in my car in a parking lot because I am trying to find a place where I can get some quiet for a few minutes. And of course, as I say that, there's some kind of industrial vehicle backing up, so beep, beep, beep. But for something to resonate for me, whether it is a spiritual consideration or art, or it is a life philosophy or self-help or self-development, personal development, intellectual exercise, it needs to resonate in the context in which I live in right now, which is we're in the 21st century and computers mediate a lot of our experiences. And if you are living in the United States, and if you are listening to this via some kind of cell phone or tech device, you are probably living in a city. I think more than half of the world lives in cities, and I think in the United States it's something like somewhere between 65% and 85% of the population are living in one of the major metropolitan areas or an urban environment. And so for something to be a concept, a framework of beliefs, a framework of practices, for those to be, or any set of things, for those to be relevant, they need to stand in the world that they live in. And for many of us, that is in a city and alongside technology. So that's a bit about what the show is about. And because that was kind of a ramble, the show is about play. The show is about making it up. It's exploring not just beliefs, but actual practices, taking sort of the approach of someone who may be agnostic in the sense that they haven't necessarily figured out all of the details of what they believe or what they are going to use and put together for how they move forward in the world, but folks who have taken some spiritual sovereignty or personal sovereignty, and that they're going to be radically responsible for what it is that they acknowledge or decide works for them. So play, practice, sovereignty, and then magic. I mean, it's also magical when you combine the idea that you even can make it up as you go along. There's something mystical and magical about that I think sort of returns us to our inner child. And then lastly, it is about what then will work for us in our lives today. So, what inspired this show? And I should say that I am so excited to be recording this, and the fact that there is a car idling next to me, and I hope that background noise doesn't come through, that I have been waiting on recording this intro for a year. And so the themes that inspired me over a year ago, and I have been sort of stalling on this because I have been wanting it to all be perfect. And today I just decided today is the day. Today is the day that the intro is finalized, because it will never be perfect, and I will never be able to cover all of the things, and I will never be able to explain all of the things. It is literally just the first episode in which I try and explain to you what the show is about. So anyway, what inspired the show about a year ago was a couple things. One is, if you are a pop culture acolyte, if you're following along, you might have noticed, I noticed, that witches are having a moment. So when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the Charmed reboot. I'm talking about the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina show. I'm also talking about what feels to me like an explosion of content being offered via YouTube and Instagram, specifically related to tarot, related to earth-based spirituality, and sort of witchy couture. I mean, if you follow some of the hashtags on Instagram, you are going to see some beautifully constructed content. There goes a train. So that is the first thing, is that it's different though. It's different than sort of the 90s goth version of witches. This is definitely sort of millennial witchiness. And one of the things that I love about it is that it is infused with a sense of play and discovery that feels newer than what had come before. And I want to also clarify that for YouTube, for example, I just discovered sort of this treasure trove of content being developed, but witchy YouTube has existed for, it looks like, about 10 years. But now those content creators are really expanding, and there's a lot of new voices being added in. There's an international aspect, and I'm here for it. I remember The Craft. I remember Silver Ravenwolf. I remember Starhawk, and what maybe was the sort of like 90s Llewellyn kind of pantheon. Well, maybe pantheon's not quite the right word. The Llewellyn voice into this in the 90s, and the sort of emergence of Witchvox and pagans on the internet that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. I was aware of it, but it really feels like now it's bigger than ever, and it is infused with an interesting energy. And perhaps that's because I'm not in my 20s anymore. And I do remember the sort of what was couture or popular in witchy circles in the 90s, that it feels like a different energy to me. But it's I think that you can, what was it, you could buy a beginning witch kit at Barnes and Noble, or some kind of like potion kit at Sephora, or big brand, big box stores carrying sort of these like little kits or little homages. And that's what I mean when I say witches are having a moment. The next thing that sort of is background for this show that I think sort of inspired the show is it feels like New Age is back. So maybe, it's some of the language around it has shifted a little bit. Maybe instead of New Age, it's now the Now Age, sort of hat tip over to the numinous. But I remember being into rocks and crystals as a preteen. You go to the science museum and they would have crystals, and oh my gosh, amethysts were so pretty. That's all I remember about crystals. But I don't know, it feels like crystals are everywhere. Crystals and sacred smoke, like folks sort of using sage or Palo Santo or what have you in lieu of incense in order to cleanse a space. That almost feels like, and maybe it's because of goop and okay, but it feels like it is common parlance now. It's on t-shirts. There's little like books that you can pick up at your local bookstore all about the healing powers of crystals, and likewise meditation and yoga. I mean, yoga culture, wow. Speaking of things being hot on Instagram, and it's back, but it's a little bit different, right? It's not exactly the New Age of the 70s and 80s, but there is a mainstreaming of it, a borrowing of ideas from New Age that are now sort of completely not, no one even raises an eyebrow at some of these things. They're so common. So that combined with witches having a moment feels like a sort of opening or a sort of mainstreaming of some ideas that makes me interested in taking another look, or as of last year made me realize that maybe there were new conversations to be had about these topics that could be combined in different ways. And the last thing that inspired this show, because I had it was a sort of an interesting experience, is that modern living has a balance problem. So I don't think that is, in a world where social media has really gone gangbusters to the point where folks have social media addiction problems, the idea of a 40-hour work week being something of the past, workaholism, some of the just in general, sort of what is happening right now with folks needing to refocus on wellness or self-care, almost as a like, I don't know how to explain it other than the idea that self-care routines need to be taught to adults now. So I feel like speaks to the fact that we have a balance problem. And I also think that this has this concept is so mainstreamed. I work in a corporation. I work for a big corporation. That's most of my career has been working for large companies. And I, sometime at the end of last summer, like before Halloween season, so the inspiration for this, a lot of the threads sort of came together for me before we even got to Halloween season. has to do with some of the tips and techniques that are being taught to, corporate, I don't know what to call us, corporate drones, corporate warriors, folks who work in big companies being taught about mindfulness and breathing techniques and meditation and the dangers of multitasking, sort of the need to focus. When you sit in one of these sort of prepared for corporate type discussions about mindfulness, about regaining personal balance, what is funny to me is that the idea is, oh, well, these concepts are backed by science. It's no longer kind of a new age woo-woo conversation. They drain all of the woo-woo out and they make it about science. And so they talk about the neurophysiology of, or sort of the physiological response to stress, and then the physiological response to breathing exercises, and the need to get up and stretch, and or the need to focus. They science-ize it, right? Because then it's not about a belief system. It's not about sort of an orthodoxic thing that would make folks uncomfortable because it's associated with spirituality, which there's not a lot of, in most corporate cultures, there's not a lot of room for spirituality. It's just not part of what folks are sort of bringing to their desks when they come to work. Not that folks aren't spiritual and can't put spiritual practices to use in the workplace, like being nice to each other, or having their own connection with whatever they believe in. It is more about, if something is going to be a practice in a workplace, then a lot of that sort of orthodoxy gets drained out of it, and it gets science-ized so that it is palatable to the audience and backed by science and completely logical, of course, and a very analytical kind of way of describing what's going on. And I can't tell you how many companies that I have worked for that have offered some combination of these programs that are wellness programs, and they're legit wellness programs. I'm not suggesting that folks are putting a science wrapper around things that are woo-woo as some kind of conspiracy or some kind of plot. It is more that, isn't it interesting that some of the things that, if you are spiritual or a seeker or woo-woo or follow a particular path, some of the practices that you may have used, mindfulness versus goal setting, prayer versus meditation, some of these things, they're coming back as relevant to more than folks who believe what you believe, or more than folks who believe anything in particular. The practices themselves are useful, and they're particularly useful in today's modern world because a lot of us have, in fact, lost track of how to stay connected to some of these ideas in today's modern world. So now I have covered what the show is about and what inspired the show. Let's take a quick moment and do a little bit of housekeeping. So I'm Alia Lux. You can call me Allie. I am the host of this podcast series, and you can find us wherever you find your podcasty content. I am trying to make sure that we are distributed across all the distributors, and you can also find us on the web at mysticpraxis.com, and I think we're probably going to stay most active on Instagram at Mystic Praxis, on Twitter, Mystic Praxis. We've created a Facebook group, so that may be a potential landing place for folks. Guess what it is? It's Mystic Praxis. And I have also found a website that lets me share bookshelves, a virtual bookshelf, and I believe that is called Libib. And I will go back and edit it if I got it wrong, but I think that's pretty cool. So that's a place where I've shared my virtual bookshelf with all of you as Mystic Praxis. And you can find all of these webs all of these links on the website, or go to one and it will lead you back to the others. And that is where you can find us. And I hope that you hit subscribe and or connect with us, because we're friendly. I'm saying we means me. I'm friendly, and this is the intro, and I don't know exactly where this is going to go as far as content and approach, but I'm excited to see what would be useful for you given the direction that I'm headed. Okay. So that was a little housekeeping and direction back to where you can find more Mystic Praxis. So the next thing that I wanted to cover with this intro episode is what the series will be like, what the sort of what you can expect from every awesome episode, and also a little bit about the feel of what I think that we can accomplish together. So generally, I think the format of the show will be that I am going to, or I will interview someone who has attempted to practice something new, and I have so many ideas of things that I want to try or that I recently tried and I want to share with you. Examples: tarot cards, Reiki, foraging for herbs, developing herbal medicines, teas, tinctures, all of the things, different types of spiritual practices, different classes that I have taken in different things. Yeah, I've gone out and taken classes with other humans on some of these things. Some things that I have learned through yoga and yoga teacher training and doing research associated with that, research into mythology and particular pantheons and particular deities or folk tales, and also books. So, hey, originally, sometime in the last year, while this little idea had been brewing, I thought of doing what I had been calling a Basic Witch Book Club, which is going back and reading some of the witchy books that I'd read in the past, rereading them with kind of new, more experienced eyes, and doing kind of a book club where we sort of share what is the book about, but then also things that we have learned. And I'm still excited about doing that, and I think that the one of the fun things about doing that is that gives me a way to capture feedback from others who may be interested in this journey, right? Because one of the maybe trap is kind of a harsh word, but one of the traps that I think folks who are sovereign and are seeking and trying to figure out what they believe do is they read a lot of books. I might be guilty of this. I read a lot of books. I'm kind of a book nerd. And they don't put things into practice, right? So you read things sort of in the abstract, and maybe you read 8 books in a row, but you don't necessarily do the practices outlined. And so when you do that, you learn a lot, you've done a lot of research, but you don't necessarily know if the practice, you may have feelings about sort of the belief structures that are described, but you don't necessarily have the practical experience associated with doing the thing, which is sort of the emphasis of this podcast, right? It's about Mystic Praxis. It's about doing the thing and then coming back and seeing how it made you feel. But one of the things that I like about book clubs or lit classes or anything where you aren't reading something alone, you are reading something with others, is that just in participating in discussion, it kind of forces you to figure out what you learned. What was your takeaway? And to hear other people's takeaways, which sometimes it just adds so much depth to what you get out of reading a book, is that you read things with a particular lens, but a lens that someone else has put on, if you just get a taste of it, it can really enhance what you have gotten out of the experience of reading the book. So sign me up for your book club. Sign up for my book club. Let's read some of these things together. So it's going to be praxis focused. It's going to be experience focused as far as what we come back and share. But I also think that there is definitely room to talk about things that we have learned through reading. And so, of course, this is sort of so I guess what I would describe is, so sharing is caring, and I care, we care, let's share together. And it's, so as far as sort of the feel, it's kind of like a book club, experience club / zine / rock band, right? I mean, some of this will be, yes, it's fun simply to hear what someone else has experienced, but it's even more fun when you play too. And I don't know if any of you ever worked with friends on a zine or a rock band or anything like that, but I always wanted to have those shared experiences of creation of something, not just absorption of things, but shared process of creation. Oh, because that's where the magic is, right? That's where the juice is when you actually create things. And it's so hard to find like-minded people. So let's take advantage of the fact that the internet allows us to connect with each other, and we can create things together. So the format of the show then is, try stuff, read stuff, make stuff up, kind of share what the experience was like, what it felt like, what we got out of it. And hopefully we can, even though, podcasts are published, right? They're kind of a one-way thing, but I would really love to figure out how we can make this more interactive, because while I suppose I will personally get something simply out of recording and sending out into the universe things that what I have learned and experienced, because I do personally get something simply out of organizing my thoughts and pulling them together in this medium, just like I would with a journal or a blog or what have you. But wouldn't it be so much more fun if we crafted the path together? I think it would. I hope you think so too. So, who am I? So you can call me Allie, and I am an autodidact, meaning I learn a lot of stuff. I've learned a lot of stuff on my own. I learn a lot through reading. I have been described as a hacker in different contexts, in the sense that, whether it's technology or art or any other medium, I just kind of, I'm scrappy, and I want to make stuff and create stuff, build stuff. And so I have, that is how I've sort of built my education, my career, and my life. And so I am excited to be introducing myself to you, and I think you're gonna learn a lot about how my brain works once we get a few more episodes in. But I think, to be fully transparent, so what I get out of this is I get my book club / zine / rock band, like I can put my ideas out there in the universe, but what I will get out of it is, feedback from you, which will sort of enhance my learning as I go out there and play and experiment. And what do you get out of it as a listener? Well, part of it is, I think, that you can live vicariously through me in the sense that, I'm going to be going out and doing these things and taking these classes and reading these books and having these experiences. And if any of these things are ideas or experiences that are interesting to you, but you're not ready yet, it can give you a taste in advance. and maybe I can answer questions for you. But I think what you get out of it is that you get to play too. You get to experiment too. You are sovereign too. And so, join me. Let's make a tribe. Let's be together. Let's be connected, even though we're all going to make our own individual choices about what works for us, and have our own individual experiences and create our own unique, compelling, juicy things that we're going to bring into this world. Let's do it together, at least for a chapter or two in our individual sort of novellas of our life. I am excited to meet you, and I am so excited that I have finally finished the introductory episode. So, by the way, P.S., before I say love Allie goodbye, the funny thing about this introductory episode, I mentioned that it's been brewing for over a year. Maybe I mentioned that I was kind of like stalling on it, blocked on it, is that I was trying to make it perfect. I wanted to fit in every little thing. I wanted my voice to resonate correctly. I don't want to stumble over my words. And so the ultimate theme of this, besides being an intro, is the idea that I wanted to chat about with you all about is the beauty of bad beginnings. And so there's a quote, and I kind of feel like it's Picasso, but I'm going to butcher the quote, and I'm probably going to attribute it wrongly, so I'll try and look it up when I get back to my desk. The quote is something like, a good artist knows how to paint, but a great artist knows when a painting is done. And I think that is brilliant, and I think that is true. And I think that, part of what has happened over the last year, in addition to kind of wanting to reconnect with some of these ideas that I've thought about and potential experiences that I've been thinking about for years, is I've reconnected with myself as an artist. And the thing about being an artist, or a dancer or a musician, is you don't have to be great to do it. You just have to do it to be one. You just have to pick up the paintbrush and start applying it to the canvas. You just have to pick up the pen and start writing in the journal. You need to, the best beginning is beginning. So I think that there is beauty in bad beginnings, because at least you have started. I have a little trick. Maybe some of you also do some variant of this, which is, when you get a sketchbook or you get a journal or a planner, a beautiful planner, and, or one of these like leather-bound, star-studded, gorgeous blank books. Do you have a shelf of blank books? Do you have a couple hanging around that they're just so pretty you never wanted to ruin them? You never wanted to have that first scribble out. You didn't know exactly how to begin. A trick that I have developed is flip one of those things open somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be in the front, and just do something terrible. Just a horrible, ugly sketch that you never want to look at again. By the way, you can paint over that. You could just put some gesso on that. You can go right over that. But the idea is pick a place, ruin it, get it over with. It's kind of like the first scratch on a car or first dent on a car. I view it as good luck, because once you have the first scratch or dent or ink blotty page or embarrassingly weird poem on a page, then you've done it. You've in quotes ruined it. So now you can move on, and you can fill that book, that sketchbook. You can drive that car. You can take those things anywhere you want to go, and you've gotten the fear of the imperfection out of the way, because certainly we're all going to do imperfect things. We're all going to have drafts. We're all going to have bad beginnings. But let's have lots of bad beginnings, because that means that we have lots of beginnings. So in any case, here is our bad beginning of an intro recorded. I am not messing with it. This is going to be it. And let's appreciate sort of the good luck associated with getting that first imperfection out of the way, because now we can pursue greatness. in any case, thank you so much for listening. It's been great to introduce myself and this potential path that you might come with me on to you. I hope you do. I hope to see you online somewhere. Much love. Let's go practice some praxis.